It's time to experience Thrill of the Hunt, a collector's podcast.
Hey, kid, you want a toy?
What does the man know about toys?
Action figures each sold separately. Batteries not included.
With Kung Fu Grip, the hands that grip.
I have 3 of each. 1 to display, 1 to open, and 1 just in case.
Why do you keep all your toys in boxes? How do you play with them?
I don't. I collect them.
You're not a collector's item. You're a child's plaything. You are a toy!
Action figures and playsets for ages 6 and up. Way up!
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to Thrill of the Hunt, a collector's podcast. We're here with episode 9. We're going to talk about crowdfunding your collection tonight. How are you doing, Brian?
I'm doing well. That's right. A mistake we made last time we spoke. We said it was episode 7, but it actually was episode 8. So we're actually at episode 9. So to clarify, for those who are keeping record at home, we're on episode 9 in this episode.
Yeah, I believe that was my goof. But it happens. Yeah. One other thing, a bit of housekeeping, is that Josh, we talked about Josh from Lightning Storm, and he does some other shows under his Toku Topics YouTube channel, but he also does work for and with the Illuminati. So we were both right there.
Yes, we were both right. How you like that? Very
so
cool.
As we're last time we didn't have a chance to talk about this, but Brian, let's talk about what we've acquired recently.
Yeah. As you guys may remember in our previous episodes, we like to always start off our show talking about our latest acquisitions, right? The latest things that we've gotten into our collection. And I'm going to say probably my latest item that I've received physically would have to be, there's so many things. What do I choose? There's so much stuff coming out, right? But I would say probably I've gotten a little bit into something called Hot Toys. So it's been a little dangerous. I've upped my collecting game in a scary way, but limited. As we know, those are pretty pricey items for collectibles. But the latest acquisition in that regard was I finally grabbed myself the upgraded Spider-Man suit from Far From Home. And it's such an amazing, pretty relevant, right? As we're recording today on November 17th, yesterday was the big launch of the second trailer for the next Spider-Man film, No Way Home, coming out on December 17th at a theater near you. It's pretty amazing figure. It comes with not only a multitude of web accessories, but probably one of the most amazing face sculpts I've seen of Tom Holland. And keep in mind, I do have some custom Tom Holland face sculpts for my 12 scale figure arts. Actually have a Maniple, which if you guys are into the custom world, you probably know who he is. One of the most well-known custom head sculpt makers out there for 12 scale. And but it's a phenomenal face sculpt. No surprise, it's a hot toy, right? But I love that figure. It's so posable. It's so much fun, and it's getting scarier and scarier as I go deeper into the Hot Toys hole, deeper into the hole.
Well, last time you said your collecting had changed, it had gotten warmer. So what you really meant by that, the little hint drop there, was it had gotten hot.
It got real hot. Yeah. And I think I started off with in the 6 scale variety, I'd started off with I had some sideshow 6 scales from back when, like I had a Qui-Gon from the Order of the Jedi series. I know Chris knows about this. He has a few figures from that too. And we both actually have a couple of the same ones in the sense, if you know it's Yoda, it's got to be Chris. So, but I have the Yoda that came with the Jedi Temple seats. You know that one, Chris?
Yep, I have that one.
Yeah, I had that one. The Luke from the Order of the Jedi, Return of the Jedi version, Qui-Gon, and Anakin from Revenge of the Sith. And I also have one from the Clone Wars style from Sideshow. And I've had those for a number of years as they came out quite some time ago. But just recently, I bought my first ever Hot Toys. You guys probably remember I talked about this for a while. One of my all-time favorite characters, Qui-Gon Jinn, was my first Hot Toy, surprisingly. Not for me, but surprising to a lot of people that would be my first choice. But it was, and it's a gorgeous figure on display. But since then, I've added, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm counting in the display case here. 5, 6. I think I have 6 now, 6 or 7 total. I have Luke from Last Jedi from the crate scene at the end. I mentioned Spider-Man, but also, well, it's not really mine, it's my wife's, to be honest, but she has it's really her fault that I've gotten to Hot Toys. If you want to blame anyone, it's her fault. And she'll tell you that it was her fault.
See, that's funny because my wife blames me for her collection now.
Oh yeah, right? That's how it goes, right? Yeah. Yeah, the collecting was always there. We just brought it out.
Exactly.
It was there. Yeah, and she has the Rocket and Groot from the first Guardians, and it took me a while to pose it, but after watching a lot of videos, but I posed Rocket on his back shoulder like you see in the film, with a gun in one of his hands and the other hand holding on to Groot with one of his feet on top of Groot's arm. It took some time, but it looks great, and I'm scared to ever move it.
That sounds pretty cool. So you've
What
pretty
about
much
you?
Well, I was gonna say, you sounds like you had teased on the last show, you kind of moved away from, and I know you'd moved away from this a while ago, the 18th scale, but you've kind of moving a little bit away from the 12th scale as well.
A little bit. I dabble here and there, like filling in some little holes here and there in displays and ideas and things. I mean, I haven't got rid of everything 12 scale. I've kept pretty much all of it. The only things I've really started to part way with, and no surprise to any of our listeners, is some of my sequel trilogy stuff that I got hard and heavy kind of really into in the beginning, when the hype was there, and then as it started to kind of clear, the smoke to clear, as we kind of saw where things were going and where it is now, kind of backed off a little bit on it a little more, and I've kept certain things from sequel trilogy, but for the most part, a lot of the ancillary stuff I've kind of moved on from.
Yeah, I got you. So for me, I've basically, it's been kind of a little bit of a lull, and I'm happy with that, because it seems like we've been in this cycle with the shipping snafu, where it's like all of a sudden you just get flooded with stuff, and then you'll go into a lull, and then you'll get flooded with stuff. And I'm in the lull right now, and I'm not unhappy about that, because it seems like I got a lot of stuff all at once. And then I'd found some stuff at retail all at the same time, all within about like a 3-week period. And, that gets expensive. But for me, it's probably my PulseCon exclusives. Along with yesterday, I got my In Space Blue Ranger with the Psycho Silver.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So I've gotten some of those. And then, the Silver In Space, which wasn't part of the PulseCon exclusive, but kind of just mysteriously went up with no announcement.
That's right.
That's probably my favorite. I just like the way that figure looks, and I'm a sucker for the 6th Ranger in any of the shows. I think it started with that first, with the Green Ranger being the 6th Ranger, yeah, and then moving on to white and whatnot. But it's funny because we're talking a little bit how your collecting's changed a little bit. And for me, I've been going through, and we've been doing a lot of projects around the house, trying to just kind of, I'm rearranging my room, I'm rearranging the storage, and we're working on the office area, some things that kind of got put off for one reason or another. And I've been going through and reorganizing my 3 3/4 inch Star Wars figures, instead of having them sorted by collection, like TVC, OTC, Power of the Force 2. That way, I've been doing them by movie. But I'll tell you what, it made me appreciate and I'm not all the way done. I probably got through 4 totes, and I probably have another 4 or 5 to go. It made me really appreciate how deep we used to go with the character selection. You're just not going to get that now. And it made me really appreciate that collection and how much depth there was there. I mean,
Oh yeah.
we went from getting senators to struggling to get main characters in the line,
Yes.
So that's kind of where I'm at. I mean, I'm more focused now on the 12th scale. So it's funny because I think that we've both kind of shifted, because I used to be really focused on the 1/18th scale, and I'm still getting those. But I think for me, and I guess this will be the first time I could have kind of put it out there. I think I'm done with the 18th scale after Mandalorian. I don't think I'm going into 18th scale for any more movies or TV shows for Star Wars coming after that. I think I'm going to draw the line there.
And the larger community is going to fry us, because
I know
they love the 1/18th scale. That's all they want.
But the problem is like, it's space. We talk about, I've been talking about space for years and years. If you listen to Year in Review Star Wars Action News shows that I've been on, I have been mentioning space for probably, I don't know, like 6 or 7 years. And I'm to a point where space is really, and storage, I've had to get super creative. And while those don't take up a lot of room, I'm just more focused on the 18, the 12th scale now, the 6-inch figures. And I'm not going to world build for these new shows. I'll collect the figures in the 6-inch scale, but I'm not going to world build. I canceled the Cantina that we talked about on the last show.
Okay.
Yeah, I did cancel that. I'm just making, I have to be very strategic going forward, since I'm in these other lines as well. And these other lines show no signs of slowing down. And we're going to get to it here. We're the crowdfunding. I mean, I've backed some projects that are coming here shortly that I'm trying to figure out, where am I going to put?
Oh yeah. I think back to the big project you did with, oh gosh, I'm trying to think of it, with all the different anthropomorphic characters. What was that called?
Animal Warriors of the Kingdom.
Animal Warriors of the Kingdom. That's right. Yeah, you went hot and heavy into that and really backed it, which a lot of people did. I mean, it was really well done stuff. But yeah, where are you going to find room for that?
Well, that's exactly it. I kind of have, I can put my Action Force stuff that should be here mid-December. It's on the water. Bobby Valla has told everybody it's shipped. It's on the water.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So we should have it mid-December, which I'm really looking forward to, but I can put that stuff with my Joes. I mean, they're made,
oh yeah,
but for Animal Warriors of the Kingdom, I actually drew out a diagram of my room and where I'm putting things, because I couldn't visualize it, but I'm like, I don't have a place to put my Animal Warriors of the Kingdom. Luckily, they're not coming until summer of next year, but still, I'm going to have to address that.
So you're going to have to build like a tier system on your.
I don't know what I'm going to do. And the thing is that Jason from Sphero, and we'll get into it a little bit down the line here, but he's teased what's coming in series 3 and 4 and some stuff beyond that. And it looks absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. There's always something coming.
Yeah.
And, but that's pretty exciting. We definitely changed and dabbled into all kinds of new things. What would you say is the one thing that you're most excited about that's coming down the pipeline soon, other than what you just described?
I'm really looking forward to, and we haven't mentioned this in a while, I'm looking forward to the next Gundam Universe wave, which is going to hit in December here. Yeah. It's Heavy Arms from Gundam Wing, which is one of my favorite Gundams. And then it's Gundam Exia from the 00 series, which I only recently started watching. It's on Hulu and really enjoyed it. And so when I saw that wave had the Exia Gundam, I decided to get that too. And now I'm going to, in my new display setup, I'm dedicating a whole shelf to the Gundams.
Cool.
So they can get their due. Cause right now they're mixed in with Transformers on a shelf and it looks cluttered and neither one of them gets their due. So the Gundams are going to get their own shelf. The Transformers will get their own shelf.
Nice.
So I think if I had to, I mean, there's a lot of stuff potentially coming, but I think those are the two that because it's just that it's a nice little line that it only, 2 or 3 waves a year. So when you get them, you really look forward to getting them.
For me, I got my alert yesterday from Sideshow that my Marty McFly will be in the warehouse the next couple of days, and I will be charged tomorrow for my final payment and shipping. So
great Scott.
Yes. Man, it's getting heavy, Doc. But yeah, I'm really excited about Marty. As you guys may know, Back to the Future is my all-time favorite movie, and the fact that they're going to re-release figures that, because I wasn't in Hot Toys, right? We got that issue where you get into something that you weren't a part of from the beginning, and you're trying to play catch up a little bit to get certain things you really, really want. And for me, I've always wanted a Marty McFly and a Doc Brown figure, and thankfully, Hot Toys has done a very nice anniversary kind of celebration for Back to the Future this year. Where they've done some specific toy store fronts at Toy Sapiens in Tokyo, which just opened this past week, I believe. And then prior to that, they had opened a store, I believe, in Hong Kong. But I'm really excited about Marty. He should be here soon. And then I have Doc on pre-order, which will come in the year of 2028. No, I'm just kidding. 2023. You understand? We're waiting for everything. Obviously, that's an issue across the board. We all know this, right? But for Hot Toys, that's always a going joke. You're like, ooh, an announcement for a new Hot Toy. We'll see it in 2.5 years.
I don't know. I think Mafex could rival them.
No, that's right. If we're talking tall scales, Mafex, they own it. That they own the tall scale market because Chris and I will eventually get both of our Caps and Thors from Endgame Final Battle versions. I believe one is due now in December and one in January. They were originally due like middle of this year, I believe, at some point. Yeah.
I think the Thor was a little bit, later in the year, but they were both. I mean, that Cap I've had on order for it seems like over a year now, and it'll get here. And of course, we've talked about it. I have a shelf dedicated for an Endgame display too. But
me too.
I am looking forward to getting those too, but I've kind of just I'm not getting excited about that till I actually get the it's in stock from Big Bad Toy Store.
Yeah. All I have left really for me, Endgame wise, to finish out my diorama setup would be those two, which are on their way eventually. And some Build-A-Figures that are harder to hunt down, like Mantis and M'Baku.
Yep, me too.
Yeah, M'Baku and Mantis, and one more than I'm not thinking of. I think is Okoye, maybe. I think.
Yep, she was a Build-A-Figure too.
Yeah,
yep,
and Okoye. Yeah, those are the three. And once I get those three, then I have everything that is come out so far in a figure form for characters from Endgame. The only ones they haven't tackled yet is Wong. Where's my Wong figure? I'm gonna say this almost every episode until it happens. Where's my Wong figure?
I'm with you now. And I kind of wasn't on the Wong train to begin with, but now I'm there because, I just watched Shang-Chi.
Yes.
And I'm a little behind, and I'm like, he's there too. Like he's everywhere in the MCU. He's been in about
4 or 5 MCU films, and he's yet to get a figure.
Yeah. It's time to give him a figure, and we need him in that display because he's pivotal to that moment, isn't he? Because him and Doctor Strange are the two going back and forth.
Where's Wong?
There we go.
Right here. Get it started. Okay. Yeah, I mean, and that's what I'm looking forward to. So some fun stuff coming for both of us. But now let's head into the meat and potatoes, Chris. Let's talk about crowdfunding and start us off by giving us a little bit of a brief history.
So I think if we're going to start with crowdfunding, and there may have been some outliers before this, but I think the big one we have to start with is the Matty Collector. And it was done a little bit different than the way they do crowdfunding now. It was more of a subscription based. And I believe the model was, and it could have changed over time, I believe the model was you paid a fee up front for the year, and you committed, and there was certain packages. Like I believe there was different levels and different packages. And I think maybe it got more complicated later on. Maybe at first it was only one package, but you paid a fee for a year, and you were committing to get X amount of figures at a price that was a little bit higher than retail, but otherwise you weren't going to get those figures because these were not sold to retail figures. And this is basically the big line is your Masters of the Universe Classics line.
And I believe there was Ghostbusters too.
Yep, there was Ghostbusters. They did one wave of Thundercats, which that was towards the end, and then they decided not to do any more, which upset people, but that
Mhm.
ran from 2008 to 2016. And along the way, they actually did do like a traditional crowdfunding with Castle Grayskull in the classic scale. Now
Oh, yeah.
it failed the first time from what I remember. And I can't remember if it failed the second or if it funded the second, but I know that it did eventually fund, obviously the last time they did it, but I know for sure it failed the first time and they just kept doing it. And so that eventually got funded. And then eventually, way moving forward, Matty Collector, with now defunct Super 7, picked up the ball and ran with the Snake Mountain,
Exactly.
which was I believe that was crowdfunded as well. I believe they had to get so many to make the Snake Mountain as well.
I think so. For Snake Mountain, it totally was crowdfunded. I do believe so. Yeah.
So that's, that kind of takes us through Matty Collector. And kind of side by side, Kickstarter starts in 2009. And obviously they're the big one in the game for your independents and smaller level companies. I didn't really stumble upon them until probably 2013, 2014, when I heard more and more people starting to talk about it, and friends saying, oh, I backed this and I backed this, and and they bet that you can crowdfund anything on there, from video games to board games to toys to clothing. There's all kinds of things. So it's
Comics,
not just
documentaries. Especially documentaries have gotten a new life through Kickstarter.
Yes. And I've backed a couple books. I've backed a couple documentaries. I've backed a couple toys or toy lines. And there's, we've had some, and there's, we'll talk about it when we get to the independents and small companies, but there was a big Kickstarter that just finished and it blew everybody away. I mean, I didn't back it, and we'll talk about it, but it's just not my thing, but it was hot. But you have them. And then in 2018, HasLab comes onto the scene. Now, the name HasLab was actually used by Hasbro before for something else, and it went defunct in 2014, I think. I don't remember what it was used for. And they brought the name back in 2018. And this is the crowdfunding platform we know now with Hasbro. They started with the sail barge, which came out of the Back the Barge from Star Wars fans wanting the sail barge. And that was a process of about, I want to say 6 years or 7 years, before we actually got the barge, which we never thought we would. But it started at Celebration. I believe that they did a diorama and a barge was built there, and fans really kind of wanted it. And they started there. And then recently Mattel is back with crowdfunding, and they're doing it the more traditional way. So they had Mattel Creations, which Mattel Creations covers a lot of different things, but they also have a crowdfunding aspect. They've done one project. We'll talk about it a little later, but they're now back in the mix as well. So that's kind of where you have your main sources. And with Kickstarter, I have heard there's other apps or other services that do that kind of thing, but obviously Kickstarter is the one that I'm most familiar with. But from a toy standpoint, these are the main ones that you'll hear about and that we're going to talk about. Obviously Kickstarter, you can't, there's so many things within Kickstarter. So it's not like these other ones where it's one company doing their brands. Kickstarter is across the board. But I think one of the interesting things that's been kind of kicked around this year is, are some of these bigger companies using the Kickstarter model to supplement their bottom line with the shipping crisis?
It's a fair take.
I mean, I think Veeb's on the Foosh, it's not my original idea. I want to give him credit. And he said that, it makes sense if you need an injection of cash on your bottom line because you don't have product to sell, then, this is perfect because you don't actually have to produce anything.
Yeah.
And then of course, all these other, and then of course, I don't know if Hasbro across the board started out this year saying we want 5, or if it ended up being this team did one and it funded, and this team, and each team is like, well, we got to do one because now the Marvel team and the Transformers team, they had just had an injection of $3 million to their bottom line. And if we don't get an injection, our budget's going to get, that could be at play. I don't know the inner workings of Hasbro, but that point has been made, and I think it's a fair one. So I wanted to throw that out here as we're kind of talking about the bigger companies using it.
Yeah, and I want to start with a statement that you said that I think is still very relevant. And I think it's a question that used to be asked when we were thinking about a project. Is it a dream project, as you like to say, Chris? Is it something that would not have been made unless there was funding put up front by people? And I feel that we're not getting a true answer to that with the latest projects that have been coming.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of teased that in our last show and kind of left you when we talked about the HasLab projects that were announced at PulseCon. What constitutes a dream project? And of course, it's very subjective. But I think if we got a bunch of people to have some dialogue, I think we would all come up with some base parameters of what you would need to hit to qualify as a quote dream project, unquote. So while it's subjective, I think that we could come up with enough to make a criteria for it. And I'm going to argue, and now we're going to kind of talk about, get into the nuts and bolts of HasLab a little bit, but I'm going to argue that 3 projects for sure fit the dream bill. 2 projects you could make an argument for either way, and the other 5 are not dream projects.
Okay.
But before we get there, I do want to point out when we're talking about it, Super 7, this is another form of crowdfunding, and it's Super 7, and there's others that use a pre-order model where money is collected up front. You pay for that product. They have a pre-order window. I'm not sure how they figure how many they need to sell to make a profit, because obviously they're a company. They're not going to sell to lose money on something. And I know that they kind of, with Ultimates, for example, Big Bad Toy Store sells them, and I think some other companies do. So
Sure.
Obviously they're getting some POs from them, but POs working in that industry, you typically don't pay for a PO till your product is in the door. And then you have terms with your supplier on which you have to pay them within a certain amount of time of those goods hitting your door. But they use that model. And I feel like, I'm sure you could make an argument either way, but I think you and I have talked about this. I feel that's a form of crowdfunding as well.
Well, I hear you. I think it could be argued both ways. And I think one thing is pretty much everything is a pre-order nowadays. When you're ordering anything, right? Even down to an individual Black Series figure, you're not buying it straight up right when it comes out. All of them, you're putting it on pre-order and then eventually trying to look for it in store and canceling that pre-order and whatnot, right? There's that life too.
Yep.
But with Super 7, it's a pre-order to make, like you said. So it's whatever is pre-ordered, that's what's made. For a Hasbro or a larger company like Mattel, you're pre-ordering an item that's going to be made regardless of you ordering it or not. Your pre-order number isn't really factored into how many they're going to make. It's just factored into how many are going to be available when they come out.
Right. And there's no money in that case. You're not paying up front.
Correct.
I know with
Correct.
Super 7,
You're not paying up front. With Super 7, you are. You're absolutely correct. That is a major point to make. And with Super 7, yeah, you're paying up front for the item, but you're guaranteed the item. With a crowdfunded project, you're not always guaranteed the item unless it meets the mark that it needs to make. And I think that is the major difference between the two. Do I think there's a lot of similarity in the process and procedure? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, it is a bit different because one can happen regardless. One can't happen unless it meets a standard. Yeah,
I agree. But I thought it was worth pointing out that could be, like I said, there's an argument to be made either way. But it can be said that is a form of crowdfunding. And I know that Super 7 themselves have with the Thunder Tank, which I don't think got funded. And maybe you can speak to this, Brian.
No, that's a pre-order. That's a straight pre-order. And
that is a pre-order?
Signed a contract with Sideshow, and it's still offered through Sideshow as a payment plan.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. Sideshow has gone into a deal with Super 7. A lot of the larger Super 7 items are available through Sideshow now.
So is the Turtle Van a pre-order as well?
Yep.
Okay. Well, the price point on that thing, woo, I think that thing's
it's available on a lot. So I give them credit that they really thought out their launch, because it's available on so many options that I think it'll be beneficial for them, because they launched it on their own site, obviously, which is a pay up front, on a sideshow, on an Entertainment Earth, and on a Big Bad Toy Store, all at the same time it was launched.
Yeah.
And I believe on Toy Wiz as well.
I just wonder, we talked about Hot Toys earlier and how, you're pre-ordering them and they usually get pushed back. And on those, Sideshow offers a payment plan, you're kind of paying. I'm waiting till when we get to the point where crowdfunding does that too, where you don't necessarily have to put all your cash up front, but you maybe pay a quarter when it funds, and then you pay a quarter when it reaches the first, tier.
I see that coming.
I do too, because, and we'll get into this, because these projects are getting more and more expensive and we're getting more and more of them. But to kind of bring it back to Hasbro and the Dream Project, we kind of talked about it, and I'll make the argument, the Barge and both Transformers projects, the Barge, the Victory Saber Transformer project, and the Proton Pack are Dream projects. I'll make the argument.
That would never be in a store.
Right.
You would never see that in a brick and mortar store.
And I'll make the argument that you could say that Unicron and the Hero Quest game are also, you could make an argument either way, but I'm going to say the Sentinel, Galactus, the Razor Crest, the Sky Striker, which I backed, people. I want to be fair here. And of course the Rancor, those are not Dream projects in my opinion.
Those could all be sold at retail and have been in the past. And the example of the Rancor, I got to be honest, it doesn't look, especially in the photos that were shown today. When I mean the photos shown today, the photos were shown with one of the main designer holding it and posing it, still unpainted, prototype. And they've been rushing very quickly to put more promos out, if you in the collector society of the world, it's been going on over the last week. A lot of damage control by Hasbro, because they didn't do a great job on managing this project from the beginning all the way through. They've made a lot of faux pas, a lot of really not smart moves, not only from a marketing standpoint, but from a standpoint of the product itself and showcasing it, and your choices of supporting items like crowdfunding additions, if you will, as you meet different stretch goals, right? Haven't really been that impressive, to quote Star Wars, not most impressive at all. And it's really, I think, turned off a lot of people, and a lot of people who were happily trying to back it. And it was like, well, if I'm going to pour $350 plus shipping and taxes into this, I hope it has more than a cardboard background and some fake bones that I could get from any customizer or print myself on a 3D printer for very cheap. I hope it has something that's unique, like a sculpt that hasn't been redone or retooled for the 30th time. You got to work for your audience. You got to sell to your audience. And if this is your best go at it, then you need to go back to the drawing board.
I just want to point out, on the last show I have called, so I said that, and you can go back and listen to verify this, but I said that Gamorrean Guard, Luke Skywalker, and some bones would be the goals. And so far, right, I'm on the money here. And
you
and
are.
The thing about it is like, and I said, I don't know what the fourth goal would be. I originally thought maybe the fourth goal would be the drool, but that when they revealed that, that's actually part of the initial offering. But here's what I'm going to say. I don't so much have a problem with a cardboard backdrop. What I have, I'm using a cardboard diorama, a 23-year-old one, for my cantina, because we still haven't gotten a plastic playset cantina. So I'm using one of those, but it should have really been included in the initial offering and not a stretch goal. And I'm sure that those bones are probably from something else that they've had cast or whatever. I'm sure that those are not all new. And even if they are, it can't be that much to mold up some bones.
No.
And again, I don't necessarily have a problem with the bones. But it just, the bones by themselves are lackluster. The bones with the cardboard, and these are all points that the Star Wars collecting community and the wider collecting community in general are making. And part of the problem with the Rancor is I think the Rancor is suffering from multiple problems. I think one of the problems is it's suffering from crowdfunding fatigue from Hasbro this year. I think that in 2020, Hasbro had a banner year with HasLab. And I want to point out, like, in 2018, they had the sail barge. In 2019, it was Unicron and the failed Cookie Monster. And for the sake of this discussion, we're not including Cookie Monster. And the reason why is
because Hasbro doesn't want to mention that it exists anymore because they deleted it from their website. I want to point that out.
Right.
Hasbro's all about promoting what they've done well, but they like to hide when they failed.
Well, I mean that, and we're not going to include them, like I said, because it failed. But also, I'm going to argue that Hasbro was not the audience for that. That you complete. That's not
true.
That's not something that you're going to sell on Hasbro.
Well, once again, that's bad marketing. They didn't market to the right audience. I mean, if they chose that as a dream project, they didn't market to the right audience.
But so if we exclude Cookie, there was only one in 2019. That was Unicron. Then you had 3 in 2020, and that was the Sentinel, the Razor Crest, and Hero Quest, all of which funded almost immediately. The Sentinel funded in less than 24 hours. The Razor Crest funded in just over 24 hours. And Hero Quest, I think, was within 48 hours. And I was shocked on the Hero Quest. I don't know much about that game, but apparently it's got a very loyal following. But then this year you've had 5, right? So we've had Galactus, we had Victory Saber in the Transformers line, and now you have 3 concurrent projects running. You have the Rancor, the Sky Striker, and the Proton Pack. And the Proton Pack is a little bit different from those other projects because it's funded, but it's not a toy as well. And the Ghostbusters community showed up and they said, "We want this." It funded. I thought it was going to fund in the first.
It's well done.
Yeah. So, but my point here is you've got 3 concurrent HasLab projects. And I think that you've had some cannibalism of because you have 3 of them. A lot of people don't have that kind of cash to back all 3. So you're having to make some tough choices. And maybe you're not into prop replicas. Maybe you're not into Ghostbusters, right? But you still have 2 running concurrently that you could be fans of both, and you might not have the cash to splash around for both of those.
Absolutely.
So that's a problem. Number 1. Number 2, right? This is the 5th project you've done this year. And so, I mean, if you backed Galactus and you backed Victory Saber, or even if you only backed one of those, but you want to back one of these, again, that's a lot of cash. And then you're asking people to put out cash for items that they still haven't got from last year. I believe at this point, all the Sentinels are finally out, but it took them a long time to get all those out. But people still don't have Razor Quest. The Hero Quest game still, I think, is just about to start shipping. But you have people that have projects that were back that they still don't have stuff, and you're asking them to put down more cash for stuff that they won't have until late 2022, early 2023. So that's another problem. And then I think that Hasbro got greedy. I'm just gonna be blunt with it. 2020, all 3 of those projects, like I said, they funded very quickly. 2020 was a very different year than 2021. Remember, for a large part of 2020, we were holed up in our houses. We weren't going anywhere except maybe to get essentials. And there were a lot of people that, if you were still fortunate enough to have your job, right, had disposable income. Plus you have stimulus checks coming in from the government. So if you're working and you're getting a stimulus check, for some people, that's extra money. So those projects, I'm going to argue, it wasn't just the selection of what they were, it was the time that they hit. People had cash. They weren't going to concerts or sporting events or movies or out to eat or traveling. So all that money, people were spending it there. And so I think that's a factor. I don't think it's the only factor. Because obviously Galactus funded, and he funded, I think they ended up selling 18,000 of him, or getting
It
18,000
all came
backers.
in the last few days, though. It was they were it did well at first, but then it was a slow crawl all the way to the finish. And then once we got into that last 24-hour period, as usual, people went crazy. That whole FOMO attitude, right? Yeah, fear of missing out, that people were having, and that caused it to skyrocket to meet all the stretch goals and everything. And that's what Hasbro is hoping is going to work out for them this time around. I'm not trying to rain on anyone's parade, but I kind of want one of those not to make it. And I don't want I want the Rancor, not Chris's. I want Chris's to go. Okay. I'm a little selfish here. I want the Sky Striker to make it. But when it comes to Rancor, I kind of don't want it to make. And I know this sounds terrible, but I'm going to give you the reason why. I want them to have to learn that you can't take advantage of your community and take them for granted by putting out a lackluster product and making people think it's okay and acceptable. Is it going to probably make? Yeah, they're probably all going to make, let's be honest. But I do want a message to be sent to Hasbro that this is not acceptable. If you want us to continue to pay out this type of money, you need to put your product where your money is, where our money is, right? It needs to be representative for what we're paying for. That's just my opinion on it. I'm sure a lot of people don't agree with that, and that's perfectly fine. Everyone's allowed their own opinion, but I feel like they need a wake-up call. They really do need a wake-up call on this.
And in part, I think they've gotten at least a partial wake-up call, because you and I have discussed this, and we had a discussion in my chat group, but they actually lost backers after the reveal on Monday. And before that, if we're going back to the Gamorrean Guard reveal, I looked at it. I didn't have the exact numbers, but I looked at it before they did that live stream, and they had about 4,400 backers. So Sunday night, I looked at it, and they only had about 4,700. So they only gained 300 backers through the weekend, the Friday after they made the Gamorrean Guard announcement. That is not a big push. They did not generate excitement. 300 is while it's more than it was getting per day, it's not that big. And then this time they actually went backwards. There are screenshots in multiple toy groups I'm in where people have screenshotted that they went backwards. And if you look at it now, and actually I can pull it up. Actually, now it's sitting at, let me refresh, because this page it's sitting at 5,113. Now it had more than that going into Monday. So it's still playing catch up from Monday. And so all of a sudden on Tuesday, we get an announcement of a Fan First Friday where we're finally going to get to see the painted model, and we're going to reveal the last two stretch goals. And I'm calling it here, folks. One of those two stretch goals is going to be a Luke Skywalker figure. The question is, and I'm telling you now, manage your expectations, because Ula is not happening.
No way.
There's a thing going on right now where people are saying no Ula, no Mula. And that's fine. I totally think that you should put your money where your mouth is.
Yeah.
And vote with your wallet. Right. But here's the thing, right? Under Disney, you're not going to get Ula. You're not going to get Leia in the gold bikini anymore. But, there's still a chance that they could come with a Rancor Keeper. Now, I don't think the Rancor Keeper was part of the original plan. And I truly believe that the stretch goals are all set out in advance, because if you go back to when they announced Galactus, they had a couple of people there from Marvel that work on some Marvel books, and they knew what the stretch goals were, because they said, I think it was Dan was talking to one of the guys, and he says, well, so-and-so really wants that fourth stretch goal. And he's like, yeah, I do. And that ended up being the Doom head. Right. And he talked about it after it funded, when they announced it, they had him on, and he talked about the Doom head and how he wished, they hope that they get it. And that, so I think these goals are set in stone. However, it doesn't mean that they can't pivot. And for me, I think the only thing at this point, I still think that all of these fund. I'm less confident in that statement than I was in our last show, but I still think they'll all fund. The question is, does it hit stretch goals? And here's the kicker. If you do the Rancor Keeper and you make him the tier 4 stretch goal, what happens if you don't get there? I'm going to be pissed. if I'm backing this,
Ooh.
because that's why a lot of people are waiting to see what the stretch goals are. And of course, we've talked about how I think you needed to include a Gamorrean guard, but I think that should have been the fourth stretch goal. I think if you were even thinking about doing the Rancor Keeper, that should have been your first stretch goal, because guess what? It would have gotten everybody out of the gate, and and they would have put their money up front and said, "Yep, I'm backing this." I'd go on record and say I think if they had said Rancor Keeper in tier 1, I think it would have backed by the end of that weekend.
Here's a novel idea. Why not do a Gamorrean Guard 2-pack with accessories to play out different scenes? It could also include like an extra accessory where you could utilize it for a Mandalorian background. Be creative. That's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be creative.
Or you could throw the bones in there.
Yeah, I mean, there's no innovation or imagination with the Star Wars crew whatsoever. It's all about efficiency and getting out as much as they can out of the same figure. And this past 2 years, we have seen multiple figures released in multiple packagings, and it's ad nauseum now. I mean, it's just ridiculous. I mean, how many different packagings of Luke Skywalker from Hoth do I need? You've done it on 3 cards now in the same freaking year. I mean, that's just, if that's not a definition of greed, I don't know what is. I mean, I don't get it. Like, you're putting out these major varieties of figures and characters in your other lines, but you're not doing anything with the line that made you who you are.
Yeah, what I'm going to add to that is simply that the Star Wars brand team is being outshined by their counterparts big time. Okay.
That's an understatement.
Well, I mean, look at Marvel. Marvel is the juggernaut
this
now.
Dude's freaking amazing.
It used to be Star Wars, and it's the Marvel team. And props to the Marvel team because they listen. I know Dan Hughes on Twitter. He's responded to me personally on Twitter. He's out there listening to the fans. And then look at the G.I. Joe team. They had several missteps in the launch of that, but they got it together. They're correcting it.
You can tell they listen. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And they moved Emily over from Power Rangers to G.I. Joe. I love Emily. She's awesome. And look at what they're putting out now. We're all drooling over what they're putting out now. They've came out and they said, look, we understand, they addressed some of the issues with the Target exclusives, and there was major frustration there. Right. And that doesn't mean you get a pass, but here's the thing. At the company I work for, we have a policy, we have, you have your mission statement, and then we have some other I forget what they're called, but one of the categories is own it. When we make a mistake as a company or as an individual, you own that mistake. Yep. And you say, look, we messed up. I'm sorry. That doesn't necessarily make it all better, but people are going to be a lot more forgiving and give you more room if you just admit you made a mistake. Like, we had an issue at, we were at Disney, and I'm not going to get into the issue here, but let's just say we had to go and talk to somebody else after we talked to one person, and they said, yeah, that shouldn't have happened. We messed up. Right. That goes a long way. And yet I haven't heard that from this team. Other teams have kind of, the G.I. Joe team didn't come out and say, well, look, we messed up, but they have said, we've talked to Target's upping their order quantities. I talked about all this in the last show. The Power Rangers team, look at what they're putting out. The Star Wars team is falling behind. And I'm just going to say it. Look, I feel like I don't want to see anyone lose their job, right? But I feel like that team needs a shakeup, and I'm definitely missing the Steve Evans and Daryl DePriest days of that team, because I don't feel like we're being listened to anymore. Now, the argument's been made. Obviously, this stuff is still selling because they're still producing it. Sure. I agree with that. People need to put their money where put their wallet where their mouth is. But at the same time, how many people are just kind of buying this stuff because, well, I got to have it all. I got to have a complete collection.
Completist. Yeah.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't want to pick on them. And I do want to point out here that the Sky Striker, I want to be fair and say that the Sky Striker the argument can be made that that was not an exciting project either. And GI Joe collectors have made the point that they have umpteen versions of Sky Strikers. It's a fair point. I've heard people say they should have done the killer whale, which is the hovercraft. It's a fair point. So it's not, but the thing is that the difference there, because I think the Rancor looks great. I don't have a problem with the product itself. I have a problem with the way they've presented things. I have a problem with the way that we got digital renderings. And then the second time when you came out, you just took the same pictures you did with the digital renderings you did with the model, but you actually had no model in the physical space with you. I'm not saying you had to pose it because I know they're delicate, but you could have had the pictures of the model doing those things, but you could have had the actual model just sitting in front of them.
It's lazy.
And
to be honest,
we don't have, we're finally getting a painted version. Look, when they released the sail barge, they had a full model painted up, ready to go when they announced it at Toy Fair in 2018. That's how you do it. That's how you generate excitement. And they haven't generated the excitement on this project. At least with the Sky Striker, they generated some excitement because it's an all new mold, right? And they addressed the issue that you've had with the two. There used to be one lever that controlled the wings and the landing gear. So you could not have your Sky Striker with the wings in the swept back position with the landing gear up. The landing gear would always be down with the wings swept back. Well, they've addressed that because now there's two different levers. So you can have your Sky Striker with the gear up or down with the wings in either position. And they've, it's a no cockpit. So you're getting a new mold. And I mean, the Rancor is an all new thing, but it just goes to
is it really though? I mean,
well, I mean,
I don't know.
I see what you're saying. It's bigger. I mean, my bottom line is
it doesn't look that big to me. Even when he was sitting with it in the photos today, it doesn't look that big to me.
See, to me, it looked, well, I think because I'm really conscientious of my space issue now, and I'm just going to go on record here. I'm not backing this thing, no matter what happens.
Obviously,
on Friday. And here's why. Even if they do a Rancor Keeper, I could buy the Rancor Keeper on eBay for $120. And yes, that is an expensive price for a figure, but then I don't have to pay the other 250 or 220, or whatever. So I'll take the hit in trying to pick up the figure on the secondary market versus paying the whole price for something I don't have room for. I don't, even if I try to store that thing is going to take up a tote all by itself. And I mentioned in the last show, I have two other displays with Rancors in them. So, but
wait till I throw this point at you.
Well, the one thing I do want to say is that the HasLabs this year, you talked about Galactus, they're following the more traditional route of a big boost in the first few days, and then you get into the doldrums of the middle, and then a big boost at the end.
Yep.
I didn't know if the Doom head was going to get funded for the Galactus for the stretch goals. I didn't know if Victory Saber was even going to get funded. And then all of a sudden it funded and it blew through all the stretch goals, but it took right up to the last day. So, 2020, there was something else going on there besides just the products they selected, but this year's followed those models. And I think we might be in store for both the Sky Striker and the Rancor on that.
I have two last things to throw into this HasLab conversation. One thing is, in comparison, the Rancor size and scale that you're getting in that you would get in this HasLab project. I have the mega colossal T-Rex that came out from Mattel in the Jurassic Park line. That came out about a year and a half ago, maybe in 2019. That thing is gigantic. It has electronic sounds. It has a chomping feature. It can eat dinosaurs, and then has a little cavity where you can open up for them to drop out. And it's a massively plastic built figure with a pretty good amount of articulation, the tail and its little arms and mouth and area. That was $50. think about that for a moment. I'm not talking about the ones you see in the store right now. It's bigger than the ones you see in the store now. This thing is massive. The Mega Colossal one, if you remember it. And it was $50.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people say that this thing is overpriced. I personally, when they first announced the price, I didn't think it, I thought it was okay, but I have heard a lot of people say that this is overpriced by about $50 to $100.
For $350, you could get a die cast hot toy Iron Man or a plastic Rancor.
Yeah, and look, I think we've obviously harped on the Rancor, but we're not. This is something that if you follow the toy community and and I know that Star Wars fans like to whinge. I mean, I think all toy fans do. Star Wars fans are the worst. Like
give me my toy.
I know that, but I think that there's some valid arguments being here. But I also think that trying to shove 5 HasLabs into 1 year is coming back to bite them too. And it's, I think you combine that with the unenthusiastic presentation of the Rancor over the 2 Fan First Fridays that they've done. And versus, I mean, look at the presentation they gave on the Sky Striker. I mean, it's just night and day. So I think between shoving that in there, people still waiting for projects that they backed from last year, which I get, these things can't be done overnight. I think that the people are saying, enough. And then the unenthusiastic way that this has been brought forward, I think people are enough. And I think I want to see all these succeed, right? Because I have friends that want the Rancor and I want them to have a Rancor. But I get what you're saying, Brian. I hear what you're saying about, they need to learn a lesson. And I agree. The lesson has to be learned. And unfortunately, if that means that a HasLab has to fail, and look, the Sky Striker is not safe at this point. It's adding about 50 to 60 backers a day. And at that rate, it will not fund if it doesn't get the push at the end. So it's not safe either, but I think that that's what it's going to take to learn. I think that comfortably, I think that you could do 2 HasLabs a year. If you wanted to push it, 3 is the maximum, but I honestly think you need to do 2 a year. And I think that you need to really think out, like, Marvel should not have one every year. Star Wars should not have one every year. Maybe your bigger brands have one every other year, and maybe your smaller brands get one every 3rd year. But you're asking fans to put out a ton of cash. And there were other things to crowdfund, as we're going to get into here, but Kickstarter had things to crowdfund, and Mattel Creations even had something to crowdfund, which that was a lot cheaper. And that one was pretty successful.
One we forgot to mention that I wanted to bring up that was recent was Mezco put out their 18-inch tall Godzilla. Okay. That's still up for pre-order, by the way. Not crowdfunded in what we just described, in the sense of it's just made to order pre-order with only having to pay $45 down. Okay, through either them directly, through Big Bad Toy Store, Entertainment Earth, all the different options. So this sucker is $450, but free shipping. Okay. But it has a light up mouth. It's 33 inches from teeth to tail. It has a movable jaw, movie accurate sounds, realistic plastic eyes, and 10 points of articulation. Let's take that into consideration, to kind of prove my point a little bit further, is that if you're going to put something out, you have to really sell it. Like Chris was saying, the presentation has to be there. When Mezco announced their Godzilla, even though you're not getting it for another year, they had amazing layout and photos of it. For Super 7 with the turtle van, fully painted and sculpted photos and promo photos with the turtles interacting with the van. Yes, the price points are high, but at least they put the effort in. And I'll leave you with that.
Yeah, because I want to, I kind of want to end the HasLab on a positive. I definitely think that there is a space for HasLab, but as we discussed, what's a dream project is debatable. And I know for me, I am holding out hope that we're going to get a 3 3/4 inch scale, modular Death Star. It's probably going to be expensive, but that's probably number one on a lot of collectors' lists. But here's what I'm going to say. The sail barge is a work of art. The way they ran that campaign was wonderful. And while it took a while to fund, I do contribute some of that to the fact that it was their first HasLab and people didn't know what they were getting into. There was some confusion. And at the end, that thing needed 5,000 to back, and it ended up getting over 8,000, just over 8,000. So I would say that was pretty successful. And I think that and Unicron were two of the more expensive ones. But that thing's a work of art. And I've been impressed. The Victory Saber from Transformers, which was literally right before these three were announced. So that, again, you have three going, but you just finished a fourth. But that one was beautiful. It looked beautiful from everything that I saw. Unfortunately, I think the Sentinel, some of the excitement from the Sentinel has been taken out with the knee problem, and that's definitely going to have to be addressed with Galactus.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And it's unfortunate that Galactus wasn't, if that had happened before Galactus had funded, I think we'd be having a different conversation about Galactus. But
that's fair.
The point is that I think there is a place for this, and I think they've done some beautiful things.
Of course.
The Unicron is massive. I've seen
the
pictures.
Platform is right. The platform isn't wrong.
Yeah.
The concepts and the platform for HasLab is absolutely on point. They've gotten too far away from what made HasLab successful, like you just described, was building something that was unique, that was wanted, that was cool, that was different, that was something you'd never get in a million years unless you backed it up front. And that's what we're not getting now, but that's what we got then.
Yep. And, my point with Unicron, I said you could make an argument either way. The reason I do include it as a dream project is because at that size, you could never sell that one at a retail store.
People have always wanted a properly made one. Like they made one, but it was kind of half made. It wasn't really made fully in the past.
They've done smaller ones that just don't capture the scale of Unicron. And so I think that was, I include that in the dream project.
I think that's fair to include because it's a dream project to Transformers fans.
Yep. And look, the sail barge is the centerpiece of my Star Wars collection. It's when I bought that thing, when I invested in that, I knew it was going to be a centerpiece that is going to be displayed all the time. And I still look at that thing and I am amazed at what they did with it. So I think maybe, I hope that they learn from the Rancor, and maybe there's something to be learned from the Sky Striker as well. I do think at the end of the day, like I said, I do think these will fund.
Yeah.
But we're going to see on Friday what gets announced. But, the question is, can they pull back some of that audience that they've lost, or is it too late, for that? And we'll see. But, at the end of the day, I want to see these things succeed, but you got to put in the effort.
Yeah. Agreed. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah. And I think, talking about Mattel Creations, we're kind of moving to them, and they're throwing their name back in the ring, pun intended, because they did a WWing Ultimate Edition New Generation Arena, and it was a little slow out of the gate. And I think that maybe that's because it was the first crowdfunding they did, but then they did something genius, and they said, if you back it by this date, we're going to throw in, I believe it was they threw in some figure that you could only get if you backed it by a certain date. And so that really boosted it. It generated excitement because people wanted that figure that you could only get there. I think it was a Randy Savage figure, if I'm not mistaken. And then they had the stretch goals.
I believe it was Kevin Nash.
Let's see here. Nope, it was Macho Man Randy Savage.
Oh, was Randy? Okay.
Yep, Ultimate Edition. Capturing his role as a commentator on Monday Night Raw.
Gotcha.
And then
They haven't shown any photos of that figure yet. That's right.
Yeah, they've just shown the picture of him in that outfit.
Right.
But once they said that figure was exclusive, and if you would get it by the time you if you backed it by a certain date, that really helped boost it. And then from there, it just kind of took off and it funded early, and then it blew past all the stretch goals and ended up getting 169% of its target. So it needed 5,000. It ended up with 8,495 backers for a reasonable $250 for everything you got.
Oh yeah, and everything you got is something you would never get in a store. You know, it's something very unique. And for a lot of folks who do a lot of photography with WWE figures, I mean, this is going to be a godsend for them. I mean, something that they're going to like absolutely have a ball with. And a lot of folks I follow too on YouTube, you know, do some stop motion stuff too with that. And they're going to have so much fun with that. Yeah.
Yeah. I have a couple friends that back this, that are big wrestling fans too. And of course they've done rings before, but I don't think they've done it with that detail, like with the turnbuckles and the ropes. And then, you know, they have the tables and chairs that were included.
It's truly a miniature version of the real deal. Like,
yeah.
That's truly what it is. Yeah.
And so this was their entry into the crowdfunding. And what's interesting is the Motu team was asked at PowerCon, which is the He-Man convention. Power Morpher Con is the Power Rangers convention. That's confusing, but they were asked about the possibility of using Mattel Creations to crowdfund something, and they said it's something they're looking at. Now, for me, I hope that that's not how we get Snake Mountain, because I'd like to get Snake Mountain at retail. That's probably honestly the only other place that I need for Motu, because space and whatnot. But you know, they've said that it's possible, you know, so I mean, who knows? Maybe they'll do.
You didn't throw down the 700 for Snake Mountain from Super 7?
The thing is gorgeous, but no.
It is beautiful, but it's a lot of money.
You know, and that's more of the classic scale. So,
yeah.
But, you know, Mattel came into this, and this was going on at the same time as Galactus as well, I believe. So Galactus was going on while this was going on. I forget which one. I think Galactus started first and then this came out. So these two were competing. So another thing competing for your collecting dollars this year. But I think they did this one well. And I'm interested to see, you know, where Mattel Creations takes their crowdfunding from here, especially since they don't have as many of the big licenses as they used to, because they don't have DC anymore. That's with McFarlane. They do have WWE, but you know, other than Motu, which of course they have like 3 different Motu lines now, with Origins, the Revelations, and then the new kids show, which I haven't checked out yet. I plan to, but the figures don't interest me for that line. We'll see where they go, but there's definitely some things they can do there.
And speaking of McFarlane, it's a good transition for us to talk about some popular Kickstarters, huh?
Yes. And that's one I actually forgot to put on our show notes, but that's a perfect one to talk about.
That was the one that really blew up and made millions and millions of dollars, was the Spawn Kickstarter campaign that happened during COVID, and started shipping to folks earlier this year. I and Chris, neither of us are big Spawn individuals, but we do appreciate a good piece of plastic. And those figures were gorgeous. And it was a nice tribute made to the original release and then updated for today's technology and tooling. And those did really, really well. I mean, that thing got backed within an hour, I believe. It was crazy.
Yeah, didn't he raise like $1 million in like some crazy amount of time? It was insane.
Yeah, I mean, he basically, he made HasLab and Hasbro Mattel look like nothing with that Kickstarter.
Yeah, it really. I was surprised how it blew up, and it kind of took the collecting community by storm. And I remember everyone was starting to follow it. They're like, he's at 1 million too. They just released, you know, unlocked this stretch goal. And I think he added stretch goals because they blew through all the stretch goals. All right,
I'll autograph all these too now. You know,
yeah,
he was just adding stuff left and right. But that's how McFarlane is. So he's very hands-on, and that's why people love his stuff and love his company and his approach, because he's very hands-on. I mean, he shoots every video himself about the prototype figures that are coming and everything. He'll open up a shoebox and show you the figure as he's getting them from from the manufacturers, like developers. And like, that's how hands-on he is, but that's what he can do. I mean, he's an independent, his own company. He can do that stuff. I mean, no different than Brian Flynn, what he does with Super 7. I think that's what makes both of those companies so endearing. But I think what's amazing, though, is how both of them have stayed true to their roots, even though they've gotten massive licenses under their belt now.
Well, it's funny because I was watching something about McFarlane, and when he was shopping around the toys for Spawn, when he had his Spawn comic, he had an offer on the table from Mattel and turned him down because he didn't think Mattel could do it the way he wanted it done. And that's why you have McFarlane Toys now. And then he completely changed the sports character
and
game,
horror.
It used to be starting lineups was that from Kenner, which
yeah,
was then bought by Hasbro. Those were the hottest things in the late 90s, early 2000s. And then when McFarlane released his sports picks, oh my gosh, those things were like trash then, because I mean, you couldn't compare the two. Like, and I have some of the McFarlane sports picks. They were
quite a few.
Yeah, they're wonderful. And I hope to get a spot to display some of them. But for his Kickstarter, that thing was amazing. And so talking about one that just finished is the Mark II Robo Skull. And I'm going to say that I think where you're going to get innovation is going to come from the Kickstarter. These bigger companies are going to play things safe. They have shareholders to cater to. They have bottom lines to worry about. And so I don't think you're going to see the innovation. Where we're seeing the innovation come is from Kickstarters, because the Robo Skull was made to fit 3 3/4 inch figures or 1/18 scale figures and 12 scale figures. That's ingenious.
Yep.
I mean, think about that for a second. Think about the appeal that toy has, and it funded pretty quickly. It blew through stretch goals. They had to add more stretch goals. And again, I didn't fund this because it's not something that, it's a pretty big piece too. It's not something that I felt I needed in my collection. And the original Robo Skull goes back to the Action Force line from the UK, from Palatoy. So it was a figure. This isn't updated. I don't know how the license, I mean, they don't have the license, but I don't know how it works that they're able to do it, but they were. And there was different people that worked on this, different companies. I think Marauders did the figures, which is another company that's done several, Marauder Task Force by Marauder Gun Runners. They've done several Kickstarters. They just, the most recent one was 18th scale Vietnam figures. So they've done like World War II and they did Vietnam figures. And then, we'd be amiss would not mention that a very popular and expensive line got its start on Kickstarter, and that's Mythic Legions.
Oh yeah.
They started on Kickstarter.
And now they're a household name. You find them in any local toy store, comic book store, as well as obviously the big boys online, Entertainment Earth and Big Bad Toy Store.
And let me tell you, like, if I had been in at the ground level with those, I would probably be collecting those, because I didn't get it on the ground level.
They're amazing.
It's easy for me to look the other way, because if you look at some of those
are
first
pretty.
ones,
Keep them over there.
Yeah, because some of those first releases are expensive. Even because they just had like a Cosmic Mythic Legions, which I wasn't digging. They've got another one on their website that they're doing now, but even so, they're expensive now just to get in.
They filled the void that McFarlane and Mezco left with the stuff they did in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Fantasy stuff.
That fantasy stuff.
That Lord of the Rings.
Bulky, bulky fantasy character. Mezco was really into that, especially, I know that from the Hellboy line. And then McFarlane did it through a lot of their movie Masters line back then. But they definitely saw that hole and they filled it quickly and continued to be. And it's very scalable with like Storm collectibles and things like that. It goes really well with some of the 112 collective stuff from Mezco now. I mean, it definitely works well. You can interchange it with a lot of things.
And they're meant to be customized. So
Oh,
Mythic
yeah.
Legions is meant to be where you
Definitely.
can pull pieces off and make your own figures. They're meant to be,
Mhm.
you can pull them apart at the waist and the different armor pieces and all that. So again, innovation, you know, the Robo Skull with the 2 different scales working for the same vehicle, Mythic Legions with parts. I'm going to, you know, shout out
Plunderlings.
Plunderlings. Yep. Plunderlings. They have just taken over.
Skyrocketed, right?
Yep.
They're everywhere. They're like tribbles. They just keep getting everywhere. You know, they're like the gremlins too, right? They just get into everything, right? But a lot of different like colors and looks and accessories and even sizes now. They're starting to get like a larger scale now and like
The big-
ogre
the-
style.
I think they call them the biggins or something.
The
like
biggins, there you go.
something like that. But yeah, I mean, I was first introduced to those from Robo on the Foosh, but now I've seen those and they've just taken off. And you know, that's a fun little line. And then, you know, I'm going to shout out Action Force here from Valaverse.
Of course.
And I can't wait to get my Wave 1 figures and Wave 2, just because of the way everything's worked out. You know, Wave 2 is going to be going up in mid-December, which is not the greatest time of year, but here's what there's a couple things here. And that the first thing is that Bobby Vala from Valaverse took the profits that he made from Wave 1 and he put them back into the company, developed Wave 2 and Wave 3 ahead of time. So Wave 2 is already, Wave 2 is going to be split into 2 parts, but part A is already being, they're getting ready to start production up on that. Because, and it will be a pre-order model going forward, not a Kickstarter model, because he took the money and put it in there. And I know that's not always possible to do it, but I think that the way he structured the company, it's great. And he showed pictures of, he actually did a live stream with Tony from Analog Toys, and they took you through the factory. You got behind the scenes footage of how it's made and how they do tampo, how they do some of the face print, how they do, you know, the QC process. And it was really informative because I've never seen anybody do a behind the scenes thing at the factory. But some of the things that we're getting from him is removable magazines in the guns. Okay. What's funny is he started that, and then all of a sudden it showed up in the G.I. Joe line. Now remember, and I'm not going to get into he used to work for Hasbro. So, you know, but there's competition there because of the G.I. Joe line. And I think the competition can only drive innovation. And what you're seeing is that G.I. Joe has upped their game, right? Now they've got removable mags. Bobby Vala put muzzle flash, you know, so you could have muzzle flash for your muzzles. There's little holes in that. Now all of a sudden the G.I. Joe line has muzzle flash holes, and they're the same diameter as the ones for Action Force. So again, you're seeing innovation on a Kickstarter model that's now making it into a bigger line. And so, you know, I think that this is great because it's pushing G.I. Joe, which will in turn push Action Force, which will push G.I. Joe, and so on and so forth. Right. So that's awesome. And then, of course, you know, we talked about Animal Warriors of the Kingdom and Jason over at Sphero Studios and what he's doing. And he's had several, I think 2 successful 1/18th scale. And this time around is getting into the 12th scale. And then one of the things that I didn't back the Kickstarter. And the reason is I reached out to the individual running it, and I'll get there in a minute, but the Airwolf and it's trademarked. It is trademarked. He did manage to get the trademark for it. I don't know if it's licensed, but it is trademarked. The 1/18th scale Airwolf helicopter by Mars Industries. And he did a Kickstarter. It funded. I reached out to him and asked him, you know, because there's different models. You can get one that you put together yourself that's molded in the color plastic. And then from there, you could go up to one that's painted, but he didn't have just a painted model. He had like the deluxe, which was put together, painted, numbered, signed, you know, all that. And I didn't want it numbered or signed, you know, I want it like, and I reached out to him and he goes, oh, we'll be selling those on our site. You can get a painted one there. They're not cheap, but he's done some innovative things like the gun pod for the chain guns and the missile pod. those are done by magnets. So you just take it off with magnet and take it off of there. The tail is removable. So if you have a space, issue, you can pull the tail rotor off and just have the front part like facing forward. So it looks like the whole helicopter's there, but it's not. The rotor, everything is magnets. So there's no hinges, so nothing can get broken. And he kind of said that he made this to go along with your GI Joes, because he does some reproduction parts for GI Joe vehicles and such. But these are the kinds of things we're getting from Kickstarter, and these are just a few. There are tons out there that we're not even scratching the surface on, but I think that's the space that excites me the most.
Yeah, and to throw on there too is, and I'm a fan of this stuff. Obviously, I'm not going to say there's a lot of unlicensed stuff that's out there, and I love looking at custom stuff. And I mentioned 29 I mentioned the 29 was it 2972 Studios the other episode to you guys. Also his Instagram handle is called Landspeeder Luke, the artist that works on this. But their stuff is just phenomenal. And if the main companies aren't filling your need for what you need, there's a lot of folks out there producing stuff at very reasonable prices that can fill that void of what you're looking for in your collection or in your backgrounds and what you're trying to build. So don't feel like you have to get, that you have to follow the certain path that's being pushed out to you by the major companies. There's other stuff out there too. And I'm also saying I'm also not saying you should go to the companies and buy stuff from them, because I think, there's a market for both. And I think that it's important that you understand that there are other ways to fulfill what you're trying to do in your collections, and to not overlook the great custom work that's being done out there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that's why I said, Kickstarter is a dangerous place for me, but Etsy is just as dangerous.
And Instagram.
Yeah. I mean, luckily I do have an Instagram, a personal one, other than our Thrill the Hunt, but I don't go out there too much, but I've been on there and it's dangerous. I mean, seeing some of these action figure photographers and what they do, I mean, it's a dangerous place. But I think Kickstarter, a lot of these excite me. I mean, I backed Animal Warriors of the Kingdom. I didn't back Action Force. I actually missed. So that Kickstarter failed the first time, and then he revamped it a little bit, and it was funded the second time. By the time I found him, he was doing things through CrowdOx, so I could still order my Wave 1. I missed out on some of the little nice exclusives they offered, but that's how the game goes. I almost did Airwolf, but once I found out that I could order it on the site with exactly what I was looking for, I decided to hold off. So, I mean, of these that we've mentioned, I've backed some of them. And then of course we've mentioned some big ones, and the Robo Skull was tempting, but it just doesn't fit with my collection. But I mean, that thing was crazy, the way people were talking about it and that was getting. But I think to wrap it up, I think that there's definitely a place for this, but I think one of the things that we still haven't seen from the big companies is kind of a Matty Collector model. And that is that I want to see HasLab get into the space where you give me a wave of figures that you can't sell at retail. Right. And you charge me a little bit more because I realize that you have to do that to make that money. But you give me, a Jabba's Palace thing. And I'm not saying you go to the extreme of giving Tanaka sisters characters, right? Because I think that would be
people will fight you on that.
I know they will, but what I'm saying is I don't think there would be enough for that. I think that there's a sweet spot of not main characters, but not extreme, like on screen for 1 second characters, like Jabba's Palace, like a Weequay Guard and maybe Ifant Man or Amanaman. And, there's plenty of characters there. I mean, for crying out loud, and we don't, this is just kind of a side note, but there's characters in the Power of the Force 2 that haven't been updated in 3 3/4 inch form that I found while I was going through my collection. EV99, 8D8, we haven't gotten an update on those since Power of the Force 2 days, right? So, and the Wolfman, which I know he was deleted from in the special editions, but I think there's a place for characters like that in the 6 scale and even the 3 3/4 inch scale, right? That you can't sell at retail, but I'd like to see them start to move into that kind of thing and maybe move away a little bit away from these big, really expensive projects. And with Marvel, I ask, you've done the 2 really big ones. I mean, where do you go from here for the Marvel Legends? And I think this is where you go. I think you go into figures that can't be sold at retail.
How about a Danger Room place?
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Right? There's an idea for you. No, there's stuff out there. I mean, you could do, scenes. You could do like an Age of Apocalypse. They just did a Wave of Age of Apocalypse figures, but you could play around with that time Savage Land. There's a lot of different kinds of themes and stuff like that. That's just X-Men, right? But yeah, I mean, there's other things that you can play around with that doesn't involve a massive figure, and I agree with you. I think having like a Matty Collector style thing for Star Wars would be cool. Like, let's say here's your chance to get all the Jedi Council figures, that you would never see them all in a wave outside of a special wave, a specialty wave of Jedi, or a specialty wave of a clone trooper general pack from like Revenge of the Sith, like something like that, where that there's a market for it, but they're very specific market.
Yeah, and I think they'll get there eventually. It's just, we've been doing some bigger projects, and like again, we've talked about kind of what we think constitutes a dream project and what doesn't. I think they're going to get there eventually, and I know that I've talked to some friends that have said that they would love to see them kind of maybe dial it back on the big stuff, a little bit, and maybe go into some figures that, like we said, you're just not going to get at retail, and you can do both scales, 1/18 and 1/12. I definitely think there's a place for these models for both Hasbro and Mattel, and obviously there's a place for Kickstarter, because I think like Kickstarter is where I get the most excited when we're talking about these things. So there's definitely a place out there. I just think that this year there's been, the last year and a half, really. I mean, there's been so much as a collector. You really have to like be conscientious of where you're putting your dollars. And I say, like, you got to back what you love, because we don't have space for all this. We don't have, right. I don't have kids, but somehow people think that that we're still loaded and have all this money. And the fact of the matter is, I have a collecting budget, right? I think any responsible collector does.
Yep.
So you can't, there's only so much you can throw your money at. And I think this year we're really feeling it, from the great Kickstarters to the different HasLabs to Mattel throwing their name in the ring. And I think that the market's going to have to work itself out. I definitely don't think that 5 HasLabs in 1 year is sustainable.
I agree. And to kind of turn it a little bit here, because I know I've been very down on some stuff today. But what I'll flip it around to say is, I'm still very thankful, because we're in the month of November, and here in the States, because I know we do have some listeners who listen in from Australia and Sweden. Actually, we have a number of folks that listen in from Australia and Sweden on our show, and I do want to mention, here in the States, we have this month of Thanksgiving that we celebrate kind of what we're happy about, what we're thankful for. And I'll be thankful that we're having all these ridiculous options for figures. Yes, our budgets and everything else are crazy, but it is a pretty cool time to have access to a Galactus that's the size of a small child, a Sentinel that can take down an entire legion of Marvel Legends figures, that we have a Razor Crest that's not destroyed yet on screen that's coming to us. That we have, I know, Sorry, I had to say it. That we have, that we have a Sky Striker, a really awesome, vehicle coming at us from the GI Joe universe, and the turtle van coming from Super. I mean, all these things 15 to 20 years ago, we could never imagine the scale and variety of things that we're getting now. Yeah, we're spoiled as hell, and we're still complaining about it, right? But that's our culture. I'm not using it as an excuse, but it's kind of our culture. But on top of that, yeah, and I think because we want it all to succeed, that's why we're giving this criticism, because we want it to do well. We want them to learn from what we're suggesting, what we're saying. So just to flip it around, we're lucky as heck to have all this stuff, but we want to make sure we do it right, and we do it so it's sustainable, so we can continue to grow in what we're doing in this field.
That is an awesome point. And I echo everything you said there. It is truly a wonderful thing that we have all these options. And look, I might not be into wrestling, but I'm glad that you're getting a WWE Ultimate Edition arena. I'm happy for those people. The same thing with the Rancor. I feel like we have been hard on the Rancor, but look, if you really love the Rancor, back it. I hope you get it. I really do. And here's
buy
the
5
thing.
of them.
I thought about the Rancor, and for me, I'm coming at it more now of a space issue. Would I like to have this size Rancor? Of course I would, but I have the space issues, but I want everybody to get
outfits
these
for him, carry him around.
I want people to get these projects, so
of course,
and of course, not everything on we've been lucky so far, other than Cookie Monster, which we've talked about, wasn't the right.
It's a sore subject in this household.
Yeah, it wasn't.
As Aaron wanted that so badly,
and it wasn't that high of a goal. But
I know
it wasn't the right audience. But
it wasn't.
But other than that, every HasLab has gone, has funded, and so far Mattel Creations, everything they've done, they're 1 for 1, and obviously not everything on Kickstarter funds, but I think that. Most, some of these projects on Kickstarter have to come back a second time, like Action Force and whatever. But I think most of the really good ones end up funding on Kickstarter. So, we are in a spoiled time. And the fact that we can leverage other collectors to get, you know what I mean? Like we can pool our money to get something funded that we wouldn't get is pretty cool. And there's definitely a model to use this to going forward and to get these things, to get the innovation we're getting from Kickstarter, which can, as I mentioned, spur innovation in the other, the bigger companies. There's a model there. It's a great time to be a collector. I mean, honestly, I don't go to bed going, oh my God, is the Rancor going to fund or not? I don't go to bed like worrying about this thing. We're talking about it on this show, but we're talking about it because this is what we're passionate about. We love, but at the end of the day, this is our hobby. This is something fun. I have real world problems just like everybody else. This stuff is not in my head when I'm going, when I'm awake at night. So, I think where I'm going to leave it is just have fun. Happy Thanksgiving. And I do want to encourage the fans. I do want to hear from you guys. If you're listening, come to our social media. Tell us what you think a dream project is. I want to hear from you guys.
Yeah.
What do you think is a dream project?
Tell us we're wrong.
Yeah,
we're fine with that. Yeah,
it's fine. Yeah, let's have a discussion. Let's have some dialogue, and it's not just about us on this end of the microphone. We want to hear from you guys. So
yeah, and kind of a teaser for the next couple of months, as you may know from our first year of recording, as we're in our second year now. In December and in January, we like to do a little cap off to the year, and next month we'll be focused on kind of giving out our awards. So keep an ear out for December, which will drop sometime in December, where we talk about our year-end awards that we give out. And if you're curious about how we decide on our awards and everything, go back and give a listen to last year's show, the 2020 year-end awards, and you can get a gauge on what to expect for this year. And then also following up in January, we'll be talking about our top 50 overall figures for the year that we've been in here in 2021. But that just about does it for our November show. We wish all of you who are celebrating a happy Thanksgiving and whatever holidays you may be celebrating all around the world. We'll catch you next time.
Well, Brian, I think that's going to do it for this episode. Come back next month to hear us talk toys and collectibles on Thrill of the Hunt, a collector's podcast. Until next time, we wish you good luck on your toy hunt.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this show, we would love a 5-star review on iTunes. You can find Thrill of the Hunt, a collector's podcast, on Facebook at Thrill of the Hunt Collector Podcast. There you can interact with us and find links to our other social media channels. The thoughts, views, and opinions expressed in this show are those of the hosts and belong solely to them. This podcast is not affiliated with any of the toy companies or licenses mentioned in the show. This show may not be reproduced, repurposed, or redistributed without express written consent from the hosts.